we're going to go through the whole concepts of what the phenomena are, plural, dealing with interstellar civilizations coming into this dimension. And it runs the gamut: consciousness, remote viewing, sound, smells, objects that are materialized, light, tonality, earth interfaces, for example, the earth actually being recruited to create phenomena that is extraterrestrial. That's a very unbelievable way that the ETs can interface with natural forces, etc., and so on and so forth. It's actually almost an infinite array of types of manifestations of extraterrestrial interface with this dimension: Earth, humans, space-time, and our consciousness, which is transdimensional. Coming in, there was a woman who very appropriately asked me about the question of whether something's from another dimension or if it's extraterrestrial. And I addressed this in LA on Sunday, last Sunday. Most people will conflate everything that's unusual as ET if they believe in ETs. Other people who don't know about ETs might have an extraterrestrial event happen and assume it's something from the afterlife or another dimension or the angelic realm. And so the old saying, the world is as you are, there's a need for discernment here. So if you take all the, as they call it, strange phenomenon. I don't like the word paranormal because it's not para to me. This is normal. But take all this unusual phenomenon and put it in this complete set. And then you take the extraterrestrial phenomena, which can be fully materialized 3D and very understandable to linear materialists, and it then overlaps partially into this transdimensional phenomenon. Yeah. What if they need me? Here are sirens. An emergency doctor goes, oh. So if you understand these two sets and then looking at the overlapping subset where they overlap, does this make sense? There is a profound amount of overlap. Why? Because if you're interstellar, as I said last night, you're transdimensional. But not everything that is interdimensional or transdimensional is extraterrestrial. Got it? So you could have some phenomena that happen that's purely from another dimension, spirit world, nature, devas, energies. Your grandmother trying to contact you, knocking over a saucer, what's been called poltergeist. So there are phenomena that can occur that belong to intelligent beings from other dimensions or embedded within the whole cosmology of everything beyond the speed of light and electrons. What I wrote about in 1995, the crossing point of light. When you go through that crossing point of light, it's like the sound barrier, but now we're talking about the light barrier. And you're in this phase shift into these other dimensions. Well, obviously, if these are interstellar civilizations, they are both, and they have physical bodies and spacecraft, and they're from planets and star systems. They have the material, what we would call material 3D component, but they've also mastered the sciences of consciousness and transdimensional physics that allow them to interface and travel at beyond the speed of light, and they can emerge in and out of these other dimensions. Now, how high or far into these other dimensions can they go? That's dependent on the level of consciousness of the aggregate leading force on that planet. What do I mean by that? Well, the aggregate consciousness of Earth is still, alas, violent, destructive, separate. So look at our technologies. Violent, destructive, separate. We burn things, fossil fuels. We blow up, we split the atom to run basically a steam engine generator from the 1800s. That's all a nuclear power plant is, right? A lot of people don't know that. They think that the nuclear power plants are getting nuclear power going straight to electricity, because people don't understand what electricity is. Actually, all a nuclear power plant is that it's heating water, turning a turbine, like in the 1800s, to create electrons flowing down the power line. That's all it is. So it's very primitive, except it creates unbelievable, ask the people about Fukushima, it creates unbelievable damage to all living creatures. And all we're doing is boiling water. That's it. That's all a nuclear power plant is. So all the entire operating system of the planet is life-destroying, cancer-inducing, violent. Your car is a controlled explosion of this noxious carcinogenic stuff called gasoline. But the technology is really concomitant. It's embedded within the state of consciousness of the aggregate awareness of the planet. Otherwise, about 50 years into the fossil fuel era, we would have had Tesla stuff, right? So this is why I keep saying, primacy is with consciousness, but it has very practical, real-world implications of the consciousness behind any technology. So let's take that example, because you can all relate to what I just said. You live on planet Earth, you know the problems. Hopefully you're not living in a cave like Dick Cheney. Oh God, sorry I said that. So what? There is no pollution, there's no global warming, and all is well with the world while we drive it over a cliff. There's that mindset. At a certain point, you then think, well, if a civilization has developed to where will be in some thousands of years, where everyone born on the planet, and this is where we're headed, at birth will be in cosmic consciousness, experiencing samadhi, because the epigenetic field and programming that gets passed on within one generation, or actually one progeny to another, will be heightened. Then the technologies that we will be using will be in concert with that level of enlightenment, up to and including the celestial level. So the civilizations that are already in a state of enlightenment, I'm not saying all of them are, but if they're at that level of actualization, and where the entire planet, or most of the beings on the planet, are in that higher state of consciousness, their technologies are based from that level of consciousness, because that's what they're able to not only explore, but maintain as a group, as a civilization and culture, but also scientifically manifest. But even the most elementary, interstellar, transdimensional civilization that can go from one star system to another has to go beyond the speed of light. So they understand the crossing point of light, and therefore they have to understand these other dimensions and the primacy of consciousness. And that's why any of them that are here that are not stagecraft by the covert government using holograms and chemicals and electromagnetic warfare systems and man-made anti-gravity things and man-made little creatures that look like aliens, which is a big part of what's reported in the UFO subculture. Those civilizations that are the genuine ET ones, their technologies are going to be amazingly embedded within other dimensions as well. And so if they fully materialize, even then you're going to feel the consciousness of that craft and their occupants. You're going to feel it, you're going to sense it. Those of you who've had, how many people had a close enough encounter with an object where you could feel the intent and the consciousness of the occupants? I'm just curious. Yes, and that is a legitimate experience, because it's almost like when my dog Rosie, I described earlier, love her. And she'll be way out in the meadow, and I'll look out a window and just look at her. She feels me and looks and locks on right to my eyes. She can feel. You see? But imagine if you had technologies that can do that. So they do. However, with that said, there are things that happen, events, phenomena that happen that are from other dimensions that aren't extraterrestrial, that are easily confusable with the ET phenomenon because there's this subset overlap. And this is where discernment comes into play. And sometimes you just don't know. You have to be an agnostic about it and say, I don't know if that was ET or from another dimension, or ET using technology or their own consciousness that is very anchored in these other deeper dimensions of thought, astral fields, etc. And sometimes you just don't know. But you need to know that there's a differential that you have, a distinction you have to go through. I liken this to a doctor who is not a very good one, who only knows one diagnosis for chest pain. It's a heart attack. Well, actually, it could be a dissecting thoracic aneurysm. It could be pleurisy. It could be an ulcer that's radiating up into the chest. It could be, there's like 115 things in the differential diagnosis for chest pain. So an unskilled physician would call everyone with chest pain a heart attack. A skilled physician would have the differential diagnosis and discernment to run through the differential, do the examinations and tests, and discover exactly what it is. See the analogy? Unfortunately, in the UFO subculture and in the New Age community, there's a lacking in discernment where everything is just the same thing. And in a sense, yes, everything is conscious and blah, 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 but you don't pluck out your eyeball as easy as you cut your fingernails. That's from a Persian saying. The reality is, in the realm of the relative, discernment is essential. And if you're going to be an ambassador from this earth to those civilizations, you need to at least know what the differential diagnosis, what the items are in it, which is why I'm going through this. So I wrote a paper about the crossing point of light, and then another one that's called Extraterrestrial Intelligence and the New Cosmology, which very few people have read, because again, no one reads. But the ones who have will go, yes, well, this begins to put all this together. And the dimensions that are attainable by an extraterrestrial civilization, if they are at the level of where we will be 500,000 years from now, where every man, woman, and child on earth will be in a state of enlightenment and God consciousness, and perhaps even unity consciousness, where they actually perceive everything as consciousness. Those civilizations that are at that level, their technologies can interface in a way that could be easily confused with the angelic realm, the afterlife, the celestial. Until, of course, they fully materialize. Obviously, in history, many people have had contact with extraterrestrials that are manifesting in a way that's interdimensional, and they will think it's not ET, but an ancestor. At the same token, there are people today who will have an interaction with a covert program's psychotronic weapon, electronic weapon systems that induce images, or a program life form, one of these robotic creatures, and ET that will think it's ET and it's man-made. Or they'll have an interaction with something, a phenomenon or a being from another dimension, and think it's extraterrestrial. So this creates an enormous amount of cosmological confusion, which I'm trying to clarify in the first 10 or 15 minutes. So that when we start showing some of this, you'll have a foundation for this, for an understanding. But when you go out with your team out under the stars, you'll really begin to think that, is it this? Is it extraterrestrial? Is it covert, human, military? Or is it from another dimension? And which dimension? And how far? It was interesting when I was at the Vatican with Monsignor Balducci. who was the senior theologian to the Pope, John Paul. He was actually a demonologist, kind of creepy, but a really nice man. And I was at his, I was going, okay, but very, very, very genuine spiritual man. And I was at his apartment overlooking St. Peter's Basilica and all this. And Paula Harris and I did an interview with him, which, hopefully we need a good Italian translator to translate all of it. But he said to me, this issue came up, and he says, "Oh yes, I hear this all the time." He says, "Neither angels nor demons need flying saucers." It was so simple and so obvious. I said, "Yes, you're absolutely right." And then we started talking about all the, the kind of cult mythology that's built up in the UFO subculture and the New Age subculture that's been advanced by the disinformation nexus of the CIA, Hollywood, and the mainstream media and video games and UFO conferences. Let's confuse them even more and stagecraft all these confusing things that are actually man-made military operations. And most people are fooled by them. So we're trying to go out and make contact, but I'm just saying you have to be sure you understand what that feels and looks like. And also know and have a healthy dose of critical skepticism. And the true word is skeptic, not a debunker, but questioning, truly questioning. Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Is it man-made? Is it ET? Or is it from another dimension? Or just a total misapprehension of something prosaic, ordinary? That discernment is really key. So when we talk about extraterrestrial intelligence and these other dimensions, we have to begin to entertain the idea, first of all, almost any way that they would manifest is going to look like magic to us. And it's very easy to confuse that with something from another dimension that isn't ET. So you just accept that that's the case. But there is a distinct learning curve that happens as you go out and begin to make contact, where you can clearly discern the energy of a human militarized decoy. It's very obvious. It's invasive. If you see the object up close, it's got seams, parts, protuberances, rivets, and stuff like this. This is not ET. Then, at a distance, you may not know, but if there is a component of invasiveness where it is inducing fear, it is almost certainly man-made. But then you get into this realm where you're sitting there in deep meditation, and multiple phenomena can start to come in, not man-made. Extraterrestrial, that's transdimensional, that appears as a sphere, floats through the group. People are in a deep state of consciousness, suddenly they hear an ancient Native American that was on that spot 5,000 years ago, because you're in a deep state of consciousness and the Akashic record is bleeding through. And then on top of that, you have events that are happening from another dimension, parallel dimensions from the afterlife or from the astral worlds. And all of that can be happening in the same evening. Get it? So one of the things I've tried to do when I take people out is to sort of be a Sherpa, a guide through that wilderness. And sometimes I'll just say, I don't know what it was. I'm not sure if it was extraterrestrial or something from another dimension, because there's not enough data, or it was too vague, or it's almost identical in its expression. So sometimes you remain an agnostic even when it's happening. I've been doing this since I was 18, which is a couple years ago. I think that's kind of how I want to introduce this, because once we get into the understanding of that, then we can understand these things. Now, what are these little things up here? They're little, they're, instead of a random number generator, this is a tri-field meter. You can get them. I recommend you special order and ask the company to get one that has the magnetic field on 0 to 3 range. And if it picks up the delta or the change in the magnetic field. So electromagnetic systems like that speaker, and it just squeals when it's doing something electromagnetic that's man-made. If you're out in the wilderness and you don't have it beside a boom box or something or a car, good grief, it really ought to be quiet once you turn the rheostat back and zero it. See? So if you've zeroed it, because as you turn a knob where it becomes silent and is at the point of the baseline magnetic field of the Earth. Does that make sense? If then there's a perturbation in it, a change in the magnetic field, you should have a heads up. Because a change in the magnetic field, torsion change, spinning, very often may be ET. Not always, but very often. And you may not see anything, but this starts making sounds that it's not even programmed to do. For example, when we were in Portugal in September, it actually began to contact an ET it was going through like a conversation that went on for a very long time. And this has happened hundreds and hundreds of times. Now you'd say, well, this is really, it's a $150, $200 electronic measuring thing. But remember, a random number generator is just a random number generator. How does it interface with consciousness? So we've asked the ETs to interface. By the way, can someone turn down the temperature? It's like 89 degrees in here. It's right there. Staffers, wake up. Oh, thank you. So this is a tri-field meter, as I said. Yeah. Model 100XE. So this Model 100XE. So it's just a very simple, but it's very sensitive. Now the CSETI app that you have on your phone, your smartphones, those of you who have it, actually causes your phone to become a magnetic field meter by using its magnetic compass. But it's not as accurate and sensitive as this is. This is a much better instrument. So when this is sitting, and you're up in the wilderness, and there's nothing near it that's electromagnetic, and it starts lighting up and talking, it's heads up. And why? Because it may not be safe for them to completely materialize in their spacecraft and have bagels and lox with you. But they can communicate through this, and they do. And it goes on sometimes for hours. Often, when we have a merging experience where there will be an ET that will begin to shimmer, you just see it with your soft eyes. You know what soft eyes are? So it's like when you're daydreaming and you're just staring into infinity and you're just aware of the energies around you, and you'll begin to see a scintillating form. Now, it could be a ghost or your grandma. But often, if you're doing these contact protocols, it'll be an ET that's not materialized. And they will walk into the group, and as they go around, these will go off to each person they go to. We've seen this. It's unbelievable. You can't even believe. Forget Arecibo. We've already done it, the SETI project. Now, it doesn't conform to their linear understanding of reality, but it's equally profound, more profound, actually, than anything that will ever come in through the SETI project. They will actually do this in different tonalities. Even though this isn't programmed to do it, they'll alter the circuitry so some will sound very emotional, some will be mathematical and intellectual. So different species will check in and out of this thing. And almost everyone who's gone with me out for a week has witnessed this, and it's an absolutely unbelievable phenomenon. So that's one. Now, this is just a radar detector. We call him Walter because somebody named Walter gave it to us. So Walter we've intended with consciousness to be a contact point for some of the ET species, of which there are thousands, millions. But there are a few that are cleared to deal with Earth, because we'll get into this, with cosmic clearance on the ET side, not the human. And this is interesting, because when this will go off sometimes, again, in a remote area where there's no microwave or police cars anywhere near, when it does beep beep, it's an indication, yes, won't be asking a question. When it goes beep beep beep, which it won't do if it hits a microwave tower or a police car, it just goes, eh. Those of you who have radar detectors, you know what they do. That's when it says, we are here. And there are different codes that we've gone back and forth with the ETs on to use this. Now, you can make up your own system with any device, because they can program it with your consciousness. That's what you can do with random number generators, and that Adam Curry is doing with the lamps that light up. So basically, you can get in one of these and start the CE5 contacts, and then ask and create your own nomenclature, okay, your own language. Understand? It's very simple. It's simple, but it's elegant and it works, which is why a lot of people will ridicule, oh, well, these things. It's really a profound. This one is a little different. This is a more expensive. You can get Radio Shack or online, this radar detector for very little. That's about $150 to $200. This is a Thunderbolt. It just went off. So this picks up lightning strikes. And a professional outdoorsman, mountain climbers, people out on the ocean use this when a storm's approaching to warn them of lightning bolt strikes. And that's all it's programmed for, to pick up the electromagnetic discharge of a massive lightning bolt. And it will range, like one just hit 50 miles away, 40 miles away. Well, there's no lightning 40 miles within here. So what we've asked the ETs to do is use this as, and in my case, because this is my personal one, this is a security protocol. So there's several ET civilizations whose dharma is, they're sort of their path is protection of people. And this one species is from the star system Arcturus. When they materialize, when they've been around us, they have these chevron-shaped craft that are like liquid gold, beautiful golden. And they're very large. They're mesomorphic, huge. I'd look like Tiny Tim by comparison. 8 to 12 feet tall, very mesomorphic, muscular, big, tall. And they will check in and out on this one for when there's a threat or if I'm moving. So if I'm hiking through the woods with it to a spot to make contact, or even driving in a car, it will go off at each point that I change direction. It's like a cosmic GPS. So when I make a right turn or a left turn and go like that, it'll go beep, beep. But you can check your weather app. There's not a lightning storm or rain within hundreds of miles. And this is going off. Now, we've talked to the engineers at the factory, at the company that makes this, that's not possible. They've said the same thing about the magnetic field meter. It is possible, because we're having electronic events happen that are coming into this dimension from interstellar technologies that are consciousness actuated with us. And these just become a way of confirming their presence, and sometimes engaging in a dialogue, like in the magnetometer. So those are tools you can use, and you can create your own. I'm very excited about the idea of this group called Entanglement and Adam Curry doing some things with random number generators where we put it in the middle of a circle where we're making contact and ask the ETs to take it over and start spitting out a message or a code with it. Wouldn't that be cool? Out in the middle of nowhere? That's the next phase. We don't have that yet. It's just something we've been discussing the last week or so. All right. That's just sort of an introduction to a few things. I was just going to start at the beginning, but we can't do it. Do we need to have it darker so you guys can see the screen? The problem is, I actually think it's more important for people to hear my narration who are here and also online than to see me, because there's really nothing to see. I mean, you've seen me. I mean, so it is. Well, I mean, enough already. The other thing we have when we go out are these. Now this is, I don't want to hit anybody. This is a 1,000 milliwatt green laser, and in really clear air it goes way out through the atmosphere. And we put this up, don't hit an aircraft or go to prison. We put this, I have never pointed at an object or you want it to, but it becomes a point where they can get a very clear fix on our exact location. And also I'll sometimes, with an ET object, will signal and play with it. That's way up in space and it'll be signaling back. One time I could feel one above us and I put this up and it was about maybe 100 feet above. You looked up and it was starry. And it actually hit a partially dematerialized or partially materialized craft that reflected this right back into the center of the circle each time. We've had amazing phenomena happen with these lasers, but you have to be careful. This is strong enough to damage your retina, and it's certainly you don't want to hit an aircraft, helicopter, or anything like that. So if you see an object far away and you're not sure what it is, even if you think you're sure, you just make a circle around it and not point at it. You can just order these online, where they're legal. In Australia, they're illegal, apparently. The other thing we do when we go out, we have the CE5 tones. And which we'll play in a moment. And these you can use it through your iPhone with some speakers, and we just play them, and we get a little radio. And people say, "What channel?" I said, "Any walkie-talkie," and just send it up, because hear it. Turn the volume up. When you hear, this is our signature tone that we send out into space. I guess the people can't turn up the volume. It's okay. Everybody hear that? That's the original tone. Came into a crop circle. It was of a frequency that it blew out a beta cam for the BBC. And it was a signal that got recorded that then was put on a loop, and each time you hear it, it's slowed down by half. And when you hear the component, it's almost like a heartbeat, an ultrasound listening to a heartbeat, beep, 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 beep. There's no speaker. I apologize. I don't know why we don't have sound and stuff yet. But anyway, that's what they are. And when you have these tones with your lights and your thought, it's the CE5 triangle again. So again, tonality, these tones, light, and consciousness, and thought. So those are the three elements we use coordinated out under the stars. We usually open our meeting with, when we're setting up, playing these tones, putting the laser up, and just connecting with the Earth and the ETs and letting them know where we are. So we're not playing this the whole time we're meditating. It'd be too distracting. So we just do it intermittently, and it breaks. But it's very important to do.